It's now been less than a week since Hurricane Milton made landfall in Florida, the second hurricane in as many weeks to hit that state. And I continue to check in on friends of mine and find out how the recovery efforts have been going so far this week. You may have seen Amanda Fye on 13 ABC last week as Hurricane Milton was bearing down on Florida. It's now been, 4 days, and she's joining me now on the Scott Sand Show. Amanda, how is Florida look in the Tampa area today?
So stuff still closed down. Like some restaurants and stores have been closed for almost a week because the hurricane hit Wednesday night and stores and restaurants start closing on Monday. So yeah, it's been a week now since a lot of places closed down because people don't have power. There's like restaurant stores don't have power, or their employees are out of town. Not everybody, but a lot of people evacuated up north, and now they can't find flights coming back because there's millions and millions and millions of people like trying to fly back to Florida. So either, restaurants and stores are still closed because they don't have power or they don't have the employees here to reopen.
It's hard to get the supplies in as well to start to reopen things, especially without power there. You live in the Tampa area. You stayed in the area, but you did evacuate your house.
So I live in Tampa. My parents are snowbirds, so they spend half the time in Toledo, but then they spend the winter down here in Tampa. But they don't live right in Tampa. They do live like 15 minutes north of Tampa, like northeast. So it's a little more inland. So they're farther from the water than I am. So the news was predicting that where I live, I was probably going to get some flooding at my house. So I did evacuate just to my parents' house, which is only like 15 minutes away. But a lot of people did evacuate to like Georgia or took flights up north or, back home somewhere.
Yeah. So when I talked to you last week, I asked if you were leaving and you said, are you kidding me? Have you seen the highways? And they look congested. It was bumper to bumper. And as people were delayed getting out because the storm moved so quickly, I'm sure a lot of people were concerned that if they left too late, they might actually get stuck on the road in the storm.
Yeah, so that was an issue too. Like I did have friends that evacuated and took the risk of leaving and being stuck on the expressway and running out of gas. One of my friends said that like she went up the whole Gulf Coast and she couldn't find a hotel until she got into Georgia. Like hotels were just sold out all north of Tampa because they said that the direct hit was going to be right to Tampa. So even going 2 hours north, I mean, you're in a way better spot than being in Tampa.
Yeah,
but hurricanes can change at the last minute.
Yeah.
We were supposed to get hit really hard, I think 2 years ago. But that hurricane was supposed to hit directly at Tampa and end up turning 12 hours before landfall and hit Fort Myers. That was 2 years ago. I think that was a really bad hurricane in Fort Myers.
Well, I remember living on the Gulf Coast, and that's why, I've been through probably 24 or more storms, 24 or more hurricanes. There was one, it was Hurricane Elena, that was bearing down on Pensacola, Apalachicola, and got miles away from the shore and actually circled back around and came back through and almost hit New Orleans. So it made a full circle last minute right before making landfall and just devastated most of the Gulf Coast. It was a weird storm to track. They certainly can change. This was a Cat 5 at one point, one of the strongest hurricanes. It did weaken before making landfall. But what was that experience like? I think this is the second or third time we've talked to you during hurricanes. So you've been through one before. What was Hurricane Milton like?
I mean, it was pretty bad. I mean, I've lived in Tampa for 8 years, and I have never evacuated. So, but we also were never going to be hit by a Category 5. So I guess this time I kind of evacuated. I went to my parents. But, I've never seen, we're still, there's no gas. There's literally, no gas in Tampa. And this is, almost a week after. And I've never experienced that. Even before, even with Helene, we just got hit with Helene 2 weeks ago. Even though that wasn't a direct hit, Tampa still got a lot of damage from Hurricane Helene. And even the gas stations, you could get gas. a couple days after Helene. But
Yeah,
with Hurricane Milton, it's been a week, and it's like gas stations are like still like no gas, or there's lines out into the road with like 40, 50 cars.
it's so unusual to be hit with back-to-back hurricanes in the matter of a couple of weeks that it's going to take a long time, I think, for the Florida area to recover. And we're seeing, from Hurricane Helene all the way up into North Carolina, where there are still hundreds of thousands of people without power and still trying to clean up from Hurricane Helene. These are two massive storms that have really devastated large swaths of the southeastern U.S. What was the worst part? Did you get any rain and flood damage where you evacuated to, or at your house near Tampa?
So my house, technically where I live is zone C. So I'm not familiar with hurricanes. There's like zone A, B, C, D, E. And kind of like zone A is usually near the coast, and they are always the first to get evacuated. It's like mandatory evacuation, zone A. And then the worse of like a hurricane becomes, then they do, all right, mandatory evacuation to zone B, zone C. So zone C, I wasn't in a mandatory evacuation zone, but zone A is 10 feet from my house. Like I can see zone A. Zone A is across the street from my house.
Wow.
So it was mandatory evacuation for zone A, which is across the street. So I'm like,
yeah, get out.
It's probably good. Yeah, it's probably a good idea if I at least go somewhat inland. So I have a 3-story townhouse. So what they were saying was storm surge was going to be like up to, 15 feet, which is, that flooding my whole entire first level. So I spent hours and hours carrying all my stuff from, my first floor up to my third floor, because I was expecting my whole first floor to be flooded. I was like, but it wasn't. I was shocked. But also it was supposed to be Category 5. And it didn't move down to a Category 3 hurricane until like 12 hours before it made landfall. So like Wednesday night, the hurricane hit. But Wednesday morning, they said it was going to be Category 5. It was going to be Category 5 or higher. So I'm like, all right, I'm definitely going to get flooding. Yeah, then they moved it down to a Category 3.
Without that last-minute little shift further south, too, it could have been much worse in the Tampa-St. Pete area. We're talking to Amanda Fye here on the Scott Sand Show, and you can find her on TikTok at social, Hannah Amanda 30. There's some great videos, but not a real alligator in the garage. You fooled me with that. It's entirely possible in Florida that alligators may have come in during flooding in the area. So you're from this area. I think you're from Bedford, Michigan. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you rather deal with like a foot of snow or another hurricane?
Honestly, probably a foot of snow. And when I first moved down here, I didn't know there was I guess they announce hurricanes sometimes like a week before, and I wasn't watching the news. I didn't know they just announced a hurricane might be hitting Tampa. Well, the first time I moved down here, I was just going to Costco for a normal grocery trip. And I literally called my mom because my mom knows more like what's going on. I'm like, I just pulled into Costco and there's not one parking spot. And then I'm like, this is nuts. And I finally found a parking spot. And I walk in Costco, no shopping carts. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I find out, they just announced a hurricane's going to hit next week. I go, this is how it is in Florida? Yep. When they say a hurricane? Yep. Like, people, it's nuts.
Welcome to Florida. Always have that supply.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, always have that supply of batteries and candles on hand, and some of the tricks, get some plastics to line your bathtub so you can fill that with water. Fill your washing machine with ice. That's a great little trick, too, because then it'll drain. I can help you out with all the tips. I've been through it all.
Yeah, you know what it sounds like you lived in Florida for a little bit.
Right. Amanda Fye here on the Scott Sand Show. Find her on TikTok, Hannah Amanda 30. I'm glad you're safe, Amanda, and I hope you don't have too much more to clean up. Hope you get power and gas and food soon.
Yeah, I hope for the state of Florida everybody gets it soon.